All right, we're with Sportsnet's Ian Mendes following Game 3, a 6-1 Senators victory. They take the 2-1 series lead. Well, we said Game 1 started a rivalry. Game 3 pushed it over the edge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, take the fights out of it if you can. Just the first 5 or 6 minutes of this game, Ottawa asserted themselves physically, and that was the big storyline in Game 2. A lot of people thought Ottawa got pushed around. And in the first 5 or 6 minutes tonight, Ottawa was the more physically assertive team. And then, of course, you have what unfolds in the third period, which is obviously going to be the thing that people remember. If you think now in 10 to 15 years from now, you will always remember the night of Game 3 where there was a full-line brawl, where there was some shenanigans, the night PK Subban jumped Kyle Turris and all sorts of things. You're right, this is the night the rivalry took the next step.
All right, a 6-1 win, and the Sens had that lead with 17 seconds left. Coach Paul McLean went to a timeout, and Michel Therrien didn't like it.
No, and I can see both sides of it here. If you're Michel Therrien, you're thinking, what, are you trying to embarrass me? We're down by 5 goals in your own rink, and you're going to just call a timeout, what, so we can sit at the scoreboard and look longer? Paul McLean's explanation during his press conference seemed to indicate that he felt like the referees weren't allowing him to bring his players to the bench, and he wanted to make sure that they were protected, and he felt his players weren't being protected, so he simply called them over to the bench and tried to tell them to smarten up and protect yourselves, and that seemed to be what the reason was. But if you're Michel Therrien, I can understand why you're upset. If you're Paul McLean, I can also understand why you're upset, because everything seems to be about you suddenly disrespecting the Montreal Canadiens.
All right, McLean wanted more physicality tonight. He got it, over 230 penalty minutes, though, and 14 fighting majors in this one.
Yeah, and it goes back to the physical nature of Game 2, where I think most people can tell you Montreal was the better team. They pushed Ottawa around. And tonight, again, the 6-1 score, the fights will overshadow the fact that Ottawa on the forecheck tonight was better. That Chris Neil, there was a couple times he came in and he zeroed in and hit Brandon Prust. And those are the things that you have to do to win in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And I think it even started in the first shift of the game. It might have been a little bit dirty, but Eric Condra got after PK Subban with his stick. And yeah, it might have been over the line, but to me, that sent the message early in the hockey game that Ottawa was here and they weren't going to get pushed around.
All right, 3 games, 3 players lose a tooth. Jean-Gabriel Pageau does it with a hat trick tonight. The 20-year-old with the best playoff performance he's had.
Yeah, and one of the best playoff performances in Senators history. He joins Daniel Alfredson as the only guys to ever have a postseason hat trick for this franchise. And here's a guy that a month ago wasn't on the roster for the Ottawa Senators, and I defy most casual Senators fans to name Jean-Gabriel Pageau a month ago. I bet you they couldn't. And now this guy on consecutive Sundays, because remember, it was a week ago, Jean-Gabriel Pageau scores the goal with about 3 minutes left at Boston. That sets up this series, and then he gets a hat trick. And it's one of those performances, and you make the joke about him losing a tooth, but this is going to go down in history as one of the great singular individual performances in Ottawa Senators history.
Following Game 1 and Game 2, we were talking about goalies. Craig Anderson in Game 1, Carey Price in Game 2. Wasn't really a goalie matchup tonight, and Carey Price let a lot in. Yeah, he lets in 6 goals, and I think it's funny because what gets overshadowed is I thought Craig Anderson was outstanding tonight. And there was a couple of plays when the game was 2-1, 3-1, where Anderson makes some big saves that will be long forgotten because Pageau adds a couple and Turris adds one, and it's 6-1, and no one thinks that Craig Anderson was the story. To me, it always boils, and you hate to be the guy that's like, well, it only comes down to goaltending, but it does. Carey Price, not that I fault him tonight at all, because there was a couple times he's left hung out to dry, but he probably should have had the Pageau second goal, which ends up being the 3-1 goal that's early in the third that changes the momentum and feel of the game. Carey Price has never won a Game 3 in his career. He's now 0-5. And now you start to examine Carey Price's postseason record. It's a little spotty, and you think, well, the Habs went on that great playoff run a couple years ago. Well, no, it was Yaroslav Halak that took him on the run. Carey Price has struggled in his postseason career when he's been the established #1 goaltender, and tonight's performance here at Scotiabank Place isn't going to help his case. His performance by media in Montreal wasn't good after Game 1, but he bounced back in Game 2. Will he do that on Tuesday?
Well, that's the thing. I think if you're a pessimistic Montreal Canadiens fan, you're thinking, this is the Carey Price we saw the last 2 or 3 weeks of the season. This is the Carey Price. Listen, a month ago or 6 weeks ago, a lot of people thought Carey Price would win the Vezina Trophy. His numbers statistically were as good as any guy that was the #1 goalie. But then he inexplicably lost his game. And we saw it at times in Game 1 when his team had a lead in the third period and he gave up 3 unanswered goals. And we certainly saw it tonight when his team gave up 5 unanswered goals. And so, history tells you probably Carey Price is going to bounce back, but there's that seed of doubt that has been planted in the minds of the fans of the Montreal Canadiens to think that maybe, just maybe, Carey Price isn't as good as we think he is.
And Montreal was clearly the top team in the first 2 games, despite the losing effort in Game 1. Did Ottawa take that over tonight?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's no rational, objective hockey fan that could look at Game 1 that Ottawa won and said that they were the better team. Craig Anderson stole Game 1. Montreal definitively was the better team, as I mentioned, especially physically in Game 2. But tonight there was no question. And again, take the fights out of it. Take any of that sort of emotion out of it. Ottawa was the better team, just even looking at this from simply a strategical standpoint. And they finally got the power play going a little bit. And that was a big issue for Ottawa. They couldn't score on the power play. Their power play in the last 4 weeks, 5 weeks has been terrible. Tonight they got it going. Well, Alfredson gets it going on a 5-on-3 goal, and you might say, okay, 5-on-3, there's an asterisk. Well, no, this power play was so bad that they needed a 5-on-3 to get it going. They got a couple of other, power play chances and goals. That, to me, was the difference in the game, too.
And do they pick this up and carry it into Game 4?
No. I say no only because I think the one thing you learn from covering the Stanley Cup playoffs is momentum is only as good as the next shift. And we saw it tonight. Hey, the Montreal Canadiens theoretically had momentum going into Game 3. Did it help them? No. So, no, I don't think Paul McLean will tell his team, we've got momentum in Game 4, because momentum, it ends the minute that puck drops on Tuesday night.
So what do they do Tuesday?
Well, I think if you're Ottawa, you try to execute the same game plan, but trying to execute the same game plan, it's going to be hard. You don't win playoff games by 5 goals very often. This is a rarity. Ottawa fans shouldn't expect a 6-1 win. It's more like this is a team that struggled to score goals all year. If I'm Ottawa, I try to win that game again the way I've won a lot of games this year, which is 1-0 or 2-1.
All right, a 6-1 Game 3 win for the Ottawa Senators. They take a 2-1 series lead. Game 4, Tuesday night.